in order to get permission to come in. Most of them built their own boats, and they had to demonstrate that they had the type of skills in order to go into the canyon. Commercial rafting didn't get started until 1969 when the Park Service, people had been doing commercial rafting, but the Park Service forced them all into contracts and then allocated some other space for private boaters. But the earliest private boaters were building their own boats in the 1950s and 60s. One of those was P.T. Riley, and another one of them was Brick Moretenson, Dave Mortenson's dad. And they built boats out of wood, fiberglass, whatever. They had boats built for them a little bit later on for the 62 and 63 trips. And they had ideas of what it was going to take in order to make a boat that could go through Grand Canyon and give them the type of really fun experience that they had. So Dave went on a trip in 62 when he was 12 with his dad. And that was probably the third trip that they had done together as a group. And then he didn't really start boating again until 2009, 2000. And then we call Dave the great instigator because he has instigated a whole bunch of us to build wooden replica boats of the boats that were used between the 1950s and the 1960s. I first met Cece, Dave's daughter, in 2011 when I was invited to come along on the Diamond Down part of a permit. And then I got a permit myself to run a river in 2014, and I built a boat for that trip, and then we've gone in 2016 and 2018. So the Mortensons are my boating family here. But all of those guys were engineers, and they all had Super 8 cameras. And collectively, they shot over 8,000 feet of film of the trips in the 1950s and 1960s. So Cece's going to talk about her experience and experiences with the family, and also is going to show a film that Dave had created using that 8,000 feet of Super 8 video. Cece Mortenson.
Thank you, everyone. So I feel so privileged to have been introduced to the canyon at such a young age from my dad, and to have grown up with these stories of incredible people. Some of you in the audience, some we've heard through the various presentations. I'm even more humbled to have gotten to met some of these legends. And I also just want to take a minute and acknowledge the traditional lands of the Indigenous people whose territory we are on, who've been the ambassadors of this place, both ancestrally and also in this modern age: the Havasu, the Halapai, the Hopi, the Navajo Dene, the Paiute, the Zuni, the Apache, and the Hopi. I've had great fortune to spend countless days in this canyon, exploring by river, on foot, rappelling down canyons. It's shaped me, and I hope in turn, my own guiding, I can support powerful experiences that help foster people in developing their own ambassadorship to these places. I appreciate the intro from Helen. I'm a certified mountain guide. I'm one of less than 25 female certified guides in North America, and I attribute, I guess, just my tenacity in believing I could do this to the stories of growing up with the men and women who braved the canyon and did these things that nobody said they could do. I think it really helped to have had that since I was such a young girl, and I hope in turn that I share that with the people who I take into mountains and canyons and wild places on the planet. We're about to watch a movie, as Helen already so lovely introduced, on P.T. Riley, Martin Litton, my grandpa, Brick Moretenson, and Multi Fulmer, their trips in the 50s and 60s. Some of the footage of these trips, it's my favorite part of the movie we're about to watch. The movie also documents the efforts of my father and all the people that he managed to convince to both build and row. He convinced me to row a boat, even though it was only my second time ever rowing any river, the first a few years previous in one of the standard boats you see, the boat rigs you see going down the canyon. This trip was really special for me, though. That was my second trip. It was really the trip that I got to kind of deep dive into the stories with my dad of what he experienced when he was 13, to understand more of the challenges that my grandpa and his contemporaries experienced when they were down in the canyon, and to really meditate on the impacts that the Glen Canyon Dam has had. And I guess this really kind of galvanized for me some of the work that I'm trying to do in my professional career as a guide, working with scientists who are involved with fighting some of the current challenges on our planet. So it was a really profound experience for me. I hope you enjoy it, and please be gentle. My dad romanticized me a little bit at the end, but really I just got a bit lucky. So please enjoy the movie.
The Grand Canyon of the Colorado River. 5 million people from all over the world visit each year. Most see the Grand Canyon from its rims. Usually, they leave after a few hours. Yet, some are seduced by the canyon. They explore its depths, attempt to understand its geology, and try to embrace its overwhelming beauty. Some fearlessly run down its mighty river. John Wesley Powell was first to run the Colorado River through the Grand Canyon in 1869. Others followed, challenging the river to seek fortune, notoriety, and adventure. All ran to see the canyon. By 1954, only about 500 people had been on the river. Less than half of these had made the complete run from Lee's Ferry to the Grand Wash Cliffs. In the next 9 years, another 1,300 people would join the list of river runners. Then in 1963, Glen Canyon Dam was completed and started controlling Colorado River flows. No more than 1,800 fortunate people would ever be able to say that they had run the wild Colorado River through the Grand Canyon. The National Park Service began to require permits to run the Colorado through this grandest of all canyons in 1955. The demand today is very high, and river runners are limited to around 30,000 each year. Most river days are allotted for recreation. Commercial guided trips from April to October are where the majority of these river days are permitted. A lesser number are issued to self-guided trips, which include the winter months. Interest is so high for these self-guided permits that a lottery determines who goes and who must continue to wait. This is the story of 1950s self-guided river pioneers and their boats, and the modern attempt to run every rapid in replica craft.
As far as we can figure, Pat Riley and Multifoamer and Dave Mortenson's dad, Brick, really were the first group of people to run Grand Canyon year after year after year after year as friends. They weren't doing it for a fee. They were doing it for fun. So it's really interesting to see what they did and how they did it and where they camped and what were the good times they had and what were the bad times they had and how did they handle being the only people out here in the middle of nowhere when they had troubles. They lost a boat, they had to hike out. They got down here on really high water in 1957 on 124,000 cubic feet a second. how did they manage that? They got the Phantom Ranch and they said, that's it, we're hiking out. And they hiked right back in the next year and got their boats and kept on going down river. So that kind of stuff, what they were doing, it was the origins, if you will, of self-guided river riding.
On June 20th, 1955, 7 men and 2 women gathered at Lee's Ferry, Arizona. This remote place was and is the starting point of Grand Canyon river trips. With the river flowing at almost 29,000 cubic feet per second, they launched 3 new home-built boats on their maiden Grand Canyon trip. 2 of these Colorado River boats were designed and built by Pat Riley, who worked for Lockheed Aircraft and lived in Studio City, California. The other boat was Multi Fulmer's creation. He lived in Muncie, Indiana, and worked for the YMCA. The 2 men had never met when they built their special purpose boats, but they had similar goals: to design a boat that they could row on their annual vacation down the Colorado through the Grand Canyon. Both desired a boat agile enough to run big whitewater while being capable of handling a 3-week journey with crew and supplies. Riley and Fulmer began their river adventures with Norm Nevels in the 1940s. Nevels, who pioneered successful commercial river trips, gave both men their initial education about river running. Independently, each came to the conclusion that Nevels' cataract boat design should be improved. Pat Riley had great respect for the early river runners and their traditions. Following one of those customs, he named his first boat the Susie R. after his wife. He named his second boat to honor George Flavell. This 1896 boatman initiated the practice of facing the rapid being rowed. He was the first to run the feared Lava Falls Rapid. Riley improved the cataract boat by adding a double end. This compared to the Neville's squared stern shape, where the rower ran the blunt end into the rapid. He also placed passengers inside rather than just having them ride on top of the decks. Riley boldly went to a new building material in boats, fiberglass. Thinking it to be lightweight and strong, Riley would later regret his decision after spending many a river day patching holes and cracks. Clearly, rocks and fiberglass don't get along. Riley's most significant contribution to Colorado River boats may be the introduction of color. His 2 boats were beautiful in the colors and designs used. They did wonders for photography. The credit goes to Riley's neighbor, Harper Goff, who was a highly respected Hollywood artist working for Walt Disney. Goff's artistic influence was big in the 1950s. He was the production designer for the 1954 hit movie 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and created the amazing Nautilus. At Disney, Goff was the second Imagineer, following only Walt himself. Goff's colorful designs were copied by boat builders in the early 1960s. The tradition of colorful Colorado River boats was set and is still popular today. Multi Fulmer was bitten by the river bug on his first Neville's San Juan River trip in 1942. In Muncie, he began building boats to improve on Neville's cataract design. Drafted into the Army during World War II, Fulmer was stationed in Central Oregon, where he learned about Northwest drift boats. This greatly expanded his thinking on boat design. After the war, Fulmer returned to the San Juan River with his own wooden boat named the Moja. He wanted to row through the Grand Canyon, so in 1953, he built a larger, improved craft named the Gem. Fulmer's Moja and Gem were the first Mackenzie dory-style boats on the Colorado River drainage. The Gem's design also incorporated centering the weight of the boat and adding self-bailing features. Fulmer's hard-hulled boat, ideal for hauling gear and running the rapids of the Colorado River, was the forerunner of the dories we see today in Grand Canyon. It was a mutual friend and fellow river runner that suggested that Riley and Fulmer team up with their new boats, since they were both looking for river running companions. It was a match that worked well as they made 5 yearly trips together. These two men ran the Colorado when it was a muddy, wild river, too thick to drink and too thin to plow. It was common for pre-Glen Canyon Dam river runners to launch on the high annual flow. They tried to run most rapids, making sure to scout the big ones. With few other trips on the river, they were on their own. They would have to be their own rescuers should problems occur. Thus, if a rapid was judged too risky, they would line the boats. Lava Falls was almost always lined. The Riley-Fulmer trips first ran their boats in 1955 and again in 1956. Both 3-week trips were delightfully completed on nice water levels. But in 1957, they ran the river at the highest water ever run, 124,000 cubic feet per second. This was 10 times higher than today's typical flow of water released from Glen Canyon Dam. Riley's Susie R. and Flavell and Fulmer's Gem would depart on June 11, 1957, with 5 men and 3 women. With the water level at 122,000 cubic feet per second and rising, the dirt road to reach nearby Lee's Ferry was underwater. So all they could do was launch from the flooded Paria River. This amazingly high water flow made camp locations hard to find. The river's speed increased, and the Colorado was a massive beast with unexpected hazards and unfamiliar rapids. Eddies were huge and in some areas caused upriver rapids and giant whirlpools. This 1959 film shows Boulder Narrows, where a large rock sits in the middle of the river. At lower water, this massive boulder is not a hazard, as boats can easily pass on one side or the other. But what happens here with very high water? Prior to launch, the curious river runners drove from Cliff Dweller's Lodge to the rim to see what they would encounter in a few days. They were relieved, for the very top of the Boulder Narrows rock was barely visible. The river was passable. But the river kept rising, and when they arrived above Boulder Narrows, there was no rock visible. Below its location was a wild rapid with a giant hole where large driftwood logs longer than the boats were sucked down and disappeared. They ran by the hole on the left and then tackled large lateral waves. Fortunately, each boat made it. Downriver is a very popular feature called Red Wall Cavern. Almost every river trip likes to stop at this incredible large cave at river level. Bigger than a football field, it's a great place to eat lunch or just play on the sandy floor below the solid rock ceiling. However, stopping in 1957 was not possible. Red Wall Cavern had floodwaters climbing high on the slanted ceiling. It was something few river runners had ever seen. Another surprise was finding the Little Colorado flooded by the high water backing up the side canyon. They were able to row the 3 boats up this tributary. They even had lunch next to Beamer's cabin, which is a deserted miner's shelter. Another remarkable occurrence in the high flow was all the drift being flushed downriver. Tree trunks, fences, and other flood debris cluttered the river surface. As the water level fell, then all this flotsam covered the beaches, causing different problems. After 7 days, the river party reached Phantom Ranch. With much discussion, they agreed to abort their trip. The flood conditions were just too uncertain, so they wisely chose safety over adventure. The gear was stored in a shed by the river gauger's cabin, and the boats tied upside down at what today is called the boat beach. The river runners then hiked out, deciding to finish it next year. Riley and Fulmer did return in 1958 with mules hired to bring in fresh supplies. Their trip continued on May 20th with 6 men departing soon after Georgie White's large commercial trip. Again, they found high water at 65,000 cubic feet per second, and the Colorado was still rising. All this water once again presented new challenges for these experienced river runners. One example was Granite Narrows. Here, this constricted gorge is only 75 feet wide with deep water and usually little challenge on low flows. However, at high water, the fast currents bounced off the walls, causing turbulent boils, surges, and large whirlpools. Conditions were treacherous for small boats. This became clear on Riley's run as the powerful current dangerously pinned the Susie R against a wall. After much effort, Riley finally freed his boat. Just downriver is Deer Creek Falls. This large waterfall flows from a beautiful slot canyon, falling 100 feet onto the rocks below. With a short walk from the river, the cool base of this cascade is often a misty retreat for summer river runners. In 1958, at over 80,000 cubic feet per second, the Riley-Fulmer party pulled their 3 boats right below the cascading water that was plunging directly into the muddy Colorado. After a day of hiking, disaster struck shortly after departing Deer Creek Falls. Brick Moretenson, who rode Riley's Flavell in 55, 57, and 58, flipped in Doris Rapid. Mortenson almost drowned before he was recovered 4 miles downriver. The Flavell with their kitchen gear was not recovered. 6 men now had to ride in 2 boats. When the party reached Lava Falls, they found that they were unable to safely run or line the boats. The 91,000 cubic feet per second high water flow caused much distress. They all knew they could not chance losing another boat, so they decided to let the Susie R and Gem go, hoping the boats would make it the 60 miles to Lake Mead. The party would hike out with the hope that Park Ranger John Riffey was at home on the rim near Toroweep. Fortunately, Riffey was there and kindly loaned a vehicle so the river party could make their way to Lake Mead to search for their 3 boats. At Temple Bar on Lake Mead, the party rented a small powerboat and started up lake, hoping to somehow find their craft still floating among all the drift. As they ran up lake, they intercepted Georgie White's party motoring toward them. She had recovered the lost Flavell and had her in tow. A happy Mortenson found little damage on his boat. Georgie offered to take the boat to Temple Bar so the men could continue to look for the Susie R and Gem. They searched all day on the drift-covered upper reaches of Lake Mead with no success. On the second day, they spotted the red bottom of the Susie R. Half sunk, the damaged boat was recovered. They continued to hunt for the Gem without success. Fulmer's Gem would finally be found in 1964 when the water level of Lake Mead dropped very low as Lake Powell was being filled behind Glen Canyon Dam. Riley and Fulmer would return in 1959 and run the 2 fiberglass-hulled boats. It became clear to Riley after a week on the river that his boats had been patched too many times and the fiberglass had lost its structural integrity. He had broken his oars, so he had no spares left. A dejected Riley decided that the trip was over. The boats were done, and the river had won. He sunk his boats at Pipe Creek, so no one would try to use the abandoned craft. After the sinking, the party once again hiked out. Pat Riley and Multi Fulmer must have thought their Grand Canyon whitewater days were over. Their boats were sunk, Glen Canyon Dam was well under construction, and another dam was planned for the Grand Canyon. Riley would write a fellow early river runner that they were like the last of the buffalo, since their wild river was being turned into lakes.
I'm in awe of the guys taking these boats down this river without sat phones and helicopters and park rangers in a boat that they'd never taken down a big river. That to me is just, I'm in awe of that. Not knowing what is lying ahead and just saying, well, that's okay, we'll deal with it when it gets there. That was truly adventure. And taking off down this thing in that kind of a condition, I think is just amazing.
On February 1st, 2011, 10 men and 6 women gathered at Lee's Ferry, Arizona. This remote place is still the starting point of Grand Canyon river trips. With the river flowing at almost 20,000 cubic feet per second, they launched 3 home-built replica boats. The Susie R., the Flavell, and the Gem. Together again, 54 years since they last ran by Boulder Narrows. The Riley and Fulmer boats have returned.
I don't know, it just became an idea. If I ever get an opportunity to run the river, it'd be fun to do it in the same boats, or same, replicas of the same boats. And when I got a permit about 5 years ago, I said, let's just go for it.
And go for it they did. First, 3 boats had to be replicated. Tom Martin took on the task of researching and replicating Fulmer's 1953 Gem. Tom worked at the south rim where the wreck of the Gem was poorly stored and forgotten. His first task was to clean up Fulmer's boat so he had a way to scale and copy the original hull design. Much of the details of the boat had to be determined from historic photos because of the wreck's condition. Tom built the Gem replica by himself, as Multi Fulmer had done. Ian Elliott, with an engineering background and boat building experience, replicated the Susie R. from just a few notes and photographs. Unlike the fiberglass hull original, Ian decided that the replica should be made out of plywood. He wisely did not want to be patching the boat all the time. The replica Susie R. was solely built by Ian, as Pat Riley had done with the original. Ian also made the Flavell replica. He hosted a boat building party that quickly assembled the plywood hull. Like Riley had done, Ian got more assistance during the construction process because the launch date was quickly approaching. Despite all the help, Ian succeeded in completing the 3rd boat. On the river trip, Tom would row the Gem. Ian would row the Susie R. Cece Mortenson, Brick's only granddaughter, would be at the oars on the Flavell.
Pretty exciting for me to row these boats. It's kind of fun because I kind of got thrown into this. You know, I'm a mountain girl. I don't have a lot of river experience, and so for me to get to row the replica of my grandpa's boat down the Grand Canyon was kind of simultaneously an exciting as well as an intimidating prospect.
In planning the run of the replicas, it was agreed that this was a unique opportunity to match historic photos, especially where the Riley-Fulmer trip stopped to repair boats or make camp. The modern crew had to hunt for the location and to discover what was still there from the 1957 trip on the highest water ever run.
All this driftwood from the 1957 flow is still here. So this log is still here, that log is still there, that log is still there, and it's all kind of rotted down because it's from 1957.
Campsites were matched and their fire rings found. Finding these sites clearly showed how high the water had been in 1957. It was exciting to view remote locations and know who, when, and why people had been there. The go-for-it attitude of the trip meant that the replica boats would attempt to run every rapid. There would be no lining of the boats on this trip. Martin Lytton, who helped save the Grand Canyon from being dammed and later formed Grand Canyon Dories, rowed his first trip as a boatman on Flavell in 1956. Recently, at age 95, he reflected on these Riley-Fulmer boats. Lytton laughingly remarked, "These boats like to run upside down as much as they did right side up." Pat Riley's 1959 flip in 24.5-mile rapid. Multy Fulmer's 1955 flip when his left oar lock seized above Horn Creek. As the 2011 trip progressed, the big rapids like Hance, Horn Creek, Granite, and Hermit were all successfully run, no flips. The monster Crystal Rapid and the challenging Bedrock Rapid were run successfully. It came down to Lava Falls. Avoid the rocks on the left and the ledge hole on the right. Only takes 20 seconds. Good run or flip, either way, would be quick. Running lava, something that Riley and Fulmer had always wanted to do, but never accomplished. On trip day 19, Lava Falls was finally reached. With several other parties joining the replica boaters to run lava, everyone anxiously watched with cameras aimed as Tom Martin made his run. Next, Ian Elliott in the Susie R made his approach to Lava Falls. Could a Riley boat make it for the first time? Conan Bliss in the safety kayak quickly got to Ian, who was hanging onto the Susie R. Ian was safely pulled ashore and the boat was recovered by other boaters waiting below. Unlike the 1950s, there was plenty of help available. Last was the Flavell, with Cece rowing on her second river trip. Same question, could a Riley boat make it? All those watching above and below stood silently as Lava Falls roared even louder. Cece slid the Flavell down the tongue of the rapid with one focus, just make it. Cece and Riley's Flavell made it.
I really feel like my grandpa always cultivated my spirit of adventure, and so I think he'd be pretty psyched to see me down here, especially since we're rowing the replica of the Flavell.
Running the 1950s replica boats gave a direct link to the past. These modern river runners were able to test and evaluate these boats and experience what Riley, Fulmer, Mortenson, and Lytton did in the 1950s. History can't be repeated, but building and running the replica Susie R., Flavell, and Jim made it easier to appreciate and hopefully honor these pioneers of self-guided trips.